Hello everyone, welcome to another video. Today I'm talking about my favorite reads from the year of 2021. Now as of today, which is December 29th, I have read 155 books and there's 2 more days of the year, so I might squeeze in a couple more, but I'm probably not going to get above 160. I have broken my favorite reads of the year into 2 categories, fiction and nonfiction, and this video is the nonfiction category. I did that because in my mind, you can't really compare fiction books to nonfiction. At least I feel like I can't make an accurate comparison. And I feel like I judge nonfiction books differently. My rating feels a little different. It's more about how well the book resonated with me or if it taught me anything, where I might rate something that was just pure whimsy and not educational at all a 5-star in the fiction category because I just had a really fun time with it. So I wanted to break these up and talk about my favorite nonfiction reads in 2021. Again, just a quick note, how did I read 155 books in a year? I don't really know. I just do. I really just think slow and steady wins the race. Just read a little bit each night and you probably too can read 155 books in a year. I don't speed read, I don't skim, I don't read particularly fast. I do listen to audiobooks when I'm in the car or when I take walks, but that only accounts for about 20 or 30 of those books. The rest of them are physical books. I don't have any handy. They're all up there that I get from my public library, which is a second point I'd like to make. I don't have any of these books to hold up because I did get them from the public library. I am a huge advocate of public libraries. All you need is to go in there and ask for a library card, and you get a library card and you have basically the world at your fingertips. And I just find that absolutely fascinating and wonderful, and I could not afford my reading habit without the public library. So unfortunately I cannot show these books because some of them belong to a different library system than the one I'm currently in, or I would have to wait for other people to return them, which is kind of the downside of working with a public library or getting your books from public library, but I think the pros far outweigh the cons. So let's dive right in. The first book that I want to talk about is probably the winner, probably in my mind, the best nonfiction book I read in 2021, and that is Soul Full of Coal Dust by Chris Hamby. Chris Hamby. I will put all the names and titles again in the description. Soul Full of Coal Dust is a book that documents coal miners in the West Virginia region who are fighting against the coal companies to get their black lung benefits. So people who might not be familiar with black lung or coal mining, there is a disease you get when you breathe in too much coal dust called black lung, and it kind of, I don't know if calcifies is the right word, it destroys your lungs and you get this debilitating disease where you can't breathe properly and it ultimately leads to death in many cases, or it contributes to death, or at the very least it does not lead to very high quality of life and can lead to full disability. The government is aware of this and has set up a fund to appropriately compensate people who have black lung. And basically the premise is the companies who work their employees in these dangerous conditions have to pay for them if they are to contract black lung while working under them. Obviously, we can already see a conflict of interest. The companies have no interest in paying for employees that are not working but got sick under their care. They don't want to pay out for that. That's expensive, particularly because, as they discuss, a key benefit to this region is kind of you can use men or women, because there are women who work in it, but it's a very male-dominated industry. You can use your employees while they're healthy and then kind of discard them when they're not healthy and just kind of leave them to die on their own of black lung. One of the powerful images discussed in the book is kind of this trajectory that you go through when you work in the coal mines. So when you're really young, particularly I think they were talking about more when children worked in the coal mines or very young people worked in the coal mines, you would start out by doing very menial jobs that didn't pay well, and then your jobs would get harder but also more dangerous and more backbreaking, and you would make more money till you reached here, peak physical ability. But then the mines would wear on you and you would slowly go back down. So you begin and end your career in the mine kind of doing the same sort of stuff. Very menial, low paid tasks. That being said, when you're here at the middle, you can make quite a bit of money. They talked about one man who put his daughter through college, which college in the United States tends to be very expensive, using the money he made at the coal mines. And in many areas is the lucrative job in the area. I have family members who grew up and are from the West Virginia area, and therefore they left quite a while ago, like decades ago. But they're very familiar with kind of the pull, the allure of the allure, I'm saying that word wrong, of the mines, because it is such a high paying and well paying job, and in many cases the one good paying job. You can support a whole family on this wage, but there's a lot of dangers. And as this book kind of exposed, a lot of these companies knew of these dangers and didn't really care because they viewed these men as a disposable resource. They viewed these men as someone they can always get more of. There's always going to be a new generation of men graduating high school, looking for a great job. Why do we need to spend money on safety things when Bill here gets to the point where he can't breathe properly? We can just get him discharged, or he's going to leave work voluntarily, and his son Pete's going to be ready to take the job, and he's going to be healthy, and he can start doing this, which is kind of the mindset of these companies. I'm sure maybe they have their position too, which is discussed in the book, but I think there are bad actors. I think that much can be said. In the field, there are bad actors. There are people, if not everyone in the company. I don't like sweeping generalizations, so saying every single company is bad and every single miner is innocent of everything, that's a sweeping generalization. But in general, these companies knew what they were doing when they sent people in the mines, and now kind of the idea is they don't want to pay up. And they make it very difficult for these miners to achieve the level of proof needed to get their full benefits. So the level of proof is you have to prove that your full disability was caused by working for that company in that mine or whatever. So that creates a very high burden of proof, and companies will do quite a bit to make sure that proof doesn't get met. Or and they can do things like have their company doctor. So you have to get screened by a doctor, but you can have your company doctor who surprisingly never finds the full disability that you claim to have, which is very suspicious when other doctors very clearly seem to have it, seem to be able to see it on your scans. You're also dealing with people who have lost their source of income. Maybe they don't have the financial resources, or at the very least, even if they did everything right, they saved their money, they have money set aside, they have a retirement fund, they don't have the millions and billions that the companies do to employ the best lawyers on retainer. So you have to fight these cases. So they have to work with lawyers they can afford, or charity groups and the like. I thought this was a very, very interesting book. It kind of has an open-ended end because a lot of this stuff is still ongoing, but I thought it was very, very good. I listened to this one on audiobook. Usually I don't listen to things on audiobook that I really, really, really want to read. Like if I have a strong desire to read it, or if I really want to remember a lot of the information, I remember a lot better on paper, reading on paper. This one, I remember a lot from the book, and I listened to an audiobook, and it was so good that I was making excuses to go to the park to walk. Like in my head, I was like, oh, I'll just go to the park and walk for a couple hours so I could listen to the audiobook, because I have a personal rule and I feel gross about just sitting and listening to an audiobook. So I have to be doing something else, like cleaning, doing my laundry, cooking, driving in the car, walking in the park, which is what I did. I took a lot of long walks in the park to read this, and I was very sad when it was over. If you are looking for a book to read, I highly recommend Soul Full of Coal Dust. Maybe you'll come out a little cynical. I'm kind of positive. I tend to see things in a very positive light, but this was kind of a downer book, I'm not gonna lie. But I thought it was very, very interesting, and I highly recommend if you're looking for a book to read. That was probably my favorite nonfiction book of 2021, but I have more to talk about, so we will move on. Again, that was Soul Full of Coal Dust by Chris Hamby. The next one I want to talk about is Fluent Forever by Gabriel Weiner. I hope I'm saying his last name correctly. This book was a recent read. I read it in the last couple weeks. And this book was about language learning and language acquisition, and how people who are learning a foreign language can learn it better or quicker or faster. Some of this book is him discussing his personal method that he's learned, which he offers, which, in my experience, language learning methods work best if you're motivated by them. So if you're motivated by his method, which I really enjoy his method, and it's kind of a mix of what I was doing before with my language learning, but I've incorporated some of his ideas, which I found very successful. So for me personally, I found it very, very helpful. But I think even if you're not interested in learning a foreign language, even if you have a different method for learning foreign languages that work really, really well, even if you think his method is total trash, I still think it's a very interesting read because he spends a lot of time discussing memory retention, the acquisition of language, the role of like how our brains learn to differentiate these sounds at birth. Probably not the most comprehensive book when it comes to like language acquisition or linguistics or stuff like that, but I did think it was a great introductory read and I devoured it. Something about his writing style just clicked with me. It was a 5-star read easily. So if you're interested in any of this, maybe you're interested in the topic of like language learning but aren't really sure where to begin, or you're just looking for a light read, you don't want to pick up a textbook on language acquisition, but you're really interested in the topic, I would highly, highly recommend Fluent Forever by Gabrielle Weiner. I'm really struggling with the names. Gabrielle Weiner. Really, really enjoyed it and can highly recommend. The next book is an interesting one to make my list because I actually disagree with a key premise of the book, but I found it so fascinating that it made my final list. So I frequently read books. I shouldn't say frequently. I'm not opposed to reading books that I'm pretty sure I'm going to disagree with or I outright do disagree with. I think it's kind of an important part of a healthy intellectual life to read stuff that you disagree with, at least occasionally. You don't have to read things that you find completely repulsive, obviously, but I think reading some stuff that from a perspective that you believe is wrong, even if you read the whole book and aren't swayed by their opinion, is still a very good intellectual challenge and just kind of a healthy and important part of being an adult. I think it's very easy to get into a echo chamber where you're kind of only hearing your own opinions echoed back to you. So it's interesting. And this doesn't have to be serious topics. For example, the book that I'm mentioning next is The Man Who Quit Money by Mark Sundeen. The Man Who Quit Money details a man whose name was Daniel Suelo, I think. This was another audiobook that I wound up really loving. Basically, the title gives it all away. Basically, he decided he wanted to opt out of the monetary system completely. He doesn't want to use money. He doesn't want to have anything to do with money. I think also he doesn't even barter. So he doesn't use, because money is kind of like the in-between for bartering or whatever. Don't come at me, economic people. I don't really know anything about that, but we kind of use it in exchange. Like I do labor and I get money, and then that money kind of represents my time, and then I can kind of go, or like I sell 2 cups and I get $1, and then I use the $1 to buy a pair of shoes. I could have just traded the 2 cups for the shoes. Now I'm getting off a track. I don't really know anything about money. I could have just been making that all up. Basically, he doesn't barter either. He only takes what's freely received or like freely given or what he can get for free. So, The Man Who Quit Money. The premise that Daniel Suelo reached was that money is fundamentally evil and therefore he wanted nothing to do with it. That is not a premise I share. I do not think money is inherently evil or good. It is just a thing, and it's more about how you use it or maybe the motivations that it causes people to have, but I don't agree with the premise that money is evil. That being said, everything else in the book was very, very interesting. There is a lot of focus on what led up to that decision, which I found very, very interesting. There's a lot of different contributing factors to his decision. I think some of that would be like his religious experience, his sexual identity, which he repressed for quite a while, and several other things that just led up to his decision to. Those weren't the only contributing factors. Obviously, he strongly believed that money was the root of evil, or was inherently evil, if not the root of evil. But eventually he did wind up, he literally just took out his life savings, which at the time, it says on the cover, like, he gave up his life savings, but they don't tell you, it was $100 that he left at a gas station. So it wasn't like he gave up millions. He had always kind of lived one of those loose lifestyles where, he camps here and then he moves here and works for a co-op, and then very, very cool lifestyle. Not the lifestyle I live. I like having a stable place to live. But he loves it, and I think the one thing that I took away from the book that I really, really liked is he believed that you could live abundantly without money. And I think that's true. I do not think that money is inherently evil. I think you can live abundantly with money. I am a big fan of that. But I like the idea of proving that abundance can be found even when you are not making or even participating in the monetary system. I thought it was a very, very interesting read. I think maybe you have to be the right kind of person to enjoy this book. I can see plenty of people who just find the book kind of bleh, but I really enjoyed it. I was captivated. I, again, listened to this as an audiobook, so I was making excuses to clean the house and wash the dishes so I could listen to the book. So I highly recommend. Again, that is The Man Who Quit Money by Mark Sundeen. The next book, which doesn't sound like a 5-star read, but just stuck with me, was Boomtown by Sam Anderson. Boomtown was a book I picked off the shelf because of how many other books in my little reading project of reading about cities and what makes cities good. These books, they referenced Oklahoma City a lot. So I do live in the United States, but not in Oklahoma City. I should say that first of all. I do not live in Oklahoma City, and I feel like maybe the city has kind of an interesting reputation. I asked someone who had been to Oklahoma City several times to describe Oklahoma City to me, and they described it as tired. However, Oklahoma City has been doing a lot of interesting things to kind of revitalize itself, and this book kind of captures all the things that make this city unique and interesting. For example, it had a very unique founding. Instead of just, there was a gathering point at the river, and then more people stayed, and then people stayed permanently, and then someone put in some permanent buildings, and then there was a church. They just they forcibly removed the Native Americans. Bad idea number one. Then they just parceled up the land, and then there was people literally rushed it. So there was a land rush basically. Basically everyone lined up, and then someone fired a gun, and then you ran in, and then you staked down your plot of the land you were going to claim, and then you got it. That was it. It was free real estate, basically, because they had removed the original occupants from it. And that was that. And then people just had to make do. And that was the founding of the city, which is very interesting because how many cities are founded by that? It's in an area of the country where there is a lot of, in the subtitle of the book, apocalyptic weather. There are very, very serious tornadoes, so there's a lot of interplay with local meteorologists, a very famous local meteorologist, and some of the deadly tornadoes that come through the area. I believe that's part of Tornado Alley, which is a section of the United States that gets a lot of strong and deadly tornadoes. What else is in the book? There's a lot of focus on the basketball team, which I really like playing basketball. I think it's a really fun sport. However, I do not follow NBA or the National Basketball League here in the United States. So I was surprised at how interested I was. The author, I think, does a very good job at making seemingly mundane things interesting. I think that's the strength of the book. He can make the NBA basketball team and the drama between the different trades, like trading this player for this, or who's going to win the national championship, or what about the person who's sitting on the bench, interesting to me, someone who doesn't follow NBA. He can make the local meteorologist sound very, very interesting. He can make the history of the founding seem very, very interesting. The author, Sam Anderson, has a gift for making that sort of stuff seem interesting and really make the city come alive. Boomtown's also about the city's desire to reinvent itself and kind of improve its image, make it a better or more livable city, which is a really interesting topic for me. So I found that very, very interesting too. But I think the real strength of the book is just in the author's ability to make these more perhaps mundane, or could be mundane unless you have a more specialized interest in it, topics interesting and accessible to a general audience. So tornadoes might not be interesting to you and me. Maybe they're super fascinating to someone who has a more meteorological interest, but it makes it interesting to people like me. NBA trades, very, very interesting to a lot of people, not interesting to me, but Sam Anderson made it interesting to me. And I think that's the mark of a good author, is especially a nonfiction author, is making me care about something that previously I was more or less indifferent about. So again, I highly recommend Boomtown by Sam Anderson, one of my favorite nonfiction reads of the year. My final nonfiction read of the year isn't really a read and more of a coffee table book, and that is Women, the Image Collection by National Geographic. I thought this was an excellent, excellent, excellent coffee table book. I loved it. I thought the imagery was great. I love National Geographic, the National Geographic photography. I love the photographers that they, I guess, employ or have on retainer, or I don't know what they have or what their contracts with their photographers look like, but whoever they have doing the photographing is really, really interesting. And this image collection was over a span of many, many years, so it wasn't just like what was coming out in the last 5 years, but it kind of showcased talent and women around the world for the entire range of time that National Geographic has photographic archives for. And I think it was very, very interesting, and you feel a spark of connection with these people who you didn't even share time on Earth with, but you see their humanity and you see the power of a good photograph to make me or the person reading the book connect to this person in the photograph. I think also these photographers and the pictures that they selected to include in this book do a very good job of capturing emotion, and it's hard to explain. That you feel the emotion. It's like crackling electricity in the photograph that you feel when you just flip the page, and that can span the range of human emotions. So you can see love, you can see happiness, you can see unbridled joy, you see like the motherly love. And when I say love, like there's the motherly love of the mother and the child. There's anger. There was a really moving image of a coal mining woman, a woman who is a coal miner in Virginia, harkening back to the Soulful of Coal Dust when I said men, the men in the mines. Then I was like, I'm going to talk about a woman a little bit later. Anyways, she is upset with her daughter, her like 16-year-old daughter who's getting married, and you can see the anger and the frustration of this mother who's trying to reason with her 16-year-old daughter who's sitting on a bed in a wedding dress, and you can just feel the complexity of the situation from the page. And I think that's just the mark of a really, really good photographer. It was very, very interesting. I loved it. I would highly recommend it. Even if you aren't looking for a coffee table book, I think it's just the perfect book to set out, to leaf through, to look through. If you have it at your public library, take it out, take a browse. I really, really enjoyed it, and I thought it was a good read, and therefore, a good look through, and therefore I thought it deserved mention in my 2021 nonfiction books. That's all that I have for my top nonfiction books of 2021 as of December 29th, 2021. So there can always be more coming, but I don't think I'm going to read that much more in the next couple days. What were your favorite books of 2021, fiction or nonfiction? Did you read any good nonfiction this year? And if you did read any good nonfiction this year, what was it? What was your favorite read this year? What did you like learning about? Or have you read anything that was on my list? And if so, what did you think about it? Other than that, I'm going to leave you all with my books, my feelings, and my recommendations, and have a great new year.